Hello, everyone. ADV here, and I have a special treat for you today. I'm going to be interviewing Gabriel, and I think here's Gabriel now. Gabriel Miguel, I'll just introduce him first, and then I'll bring him on. And we connected actually through Telegram, and he's on the Alphabetic channel. He knows Bear and Mike, and so it's interesting. Like, this takes me back a long ways away when I read the Ringing Cedars of Russia book series. And he's created a foundation called the Anastasia Foundation. And so many of you may have read these books. Maybe you're new to the material. So we'll introduce you to some of what's going on with these books in this series. But really what it did the most, at least for what I could see and what it did for me, is it inspired us to go into deeper avenues of knowledge within us, but also to learn ways of living that are as close to nature as possible. And it really was inspiring communities, real communities. And, what we need more now, and what I talk about a lot, is private societies and proper communities. And it's nice that we are forming connections and, in our local areas, as I've been encouraging for a number of years. But we also need to build functional systems as well. And the models set out in this book series is quite functional. So it's not just, an interesting tidbit here or there. It actually is a model for how to build and how to live. And this is, a lot of people feel called to it. A lot of people feel that it's one of the closest models we have, to living in harmony with the Creator and with nature. So we're going to chat about that today. So I will bring, I believe he's backstage. I'll bring Gabriel on and we'll talk about this. So hi, and thanks everyone for joining in. Hi, Gabriel.
Hey, Amanda.
Let me just adjust my volumes here.
Can you hear me all right?
Yep, I can hear you just fine.
Beautiful.
Welcome. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. It's an honor and a pleasure. And I wanted to say, too, to start in the beginning, I just want to say I have a ton of respect for you and your work, everything you've done over the years, all the content that you've put out to help people, and especially the stance that you took during the whole, that whole thing. I don't know how free we are. So I just want to say thanks for everything that you do for people, and thank you for inviting me on.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. Yes, we're in a wonderful time in essence, because, even way back when things seemed normal, they weren't really normal.
Not at all.
So,
right.
Those of us who woke up early or who had other experiences already felt like this model of living is just not right in so many ways. And we, when I was in university, I was very active. we're change makers. We saw problems, we wanted to solve them. And we just felt like we were trying with all these different methods, like politically or socially or whatever. And so when we find something that brings us together and is also lifting, because I found, we can talk about the series a little more for people who may be new to it a little bit, because I know we're just jumping in, but
sure.
But when I read the whole series, it changed me. And it even says in it that just by reading the words, it's like something in you shifts. And I felt that. I'm very sensitive, and I resonated with it, but not more than that. It was just something was going on there, and I was curious, and I devoured those books. And this was back, I read this series back in, I Had I graduated yet? I'm not sure if I graduated yet from naturopathic college, so it was
You
back
said you
then.
were doing the Kins domain meetings in 2009, so
Yes,
probably
2000.
before 2009.
Yeah, and because I met a couple
Mhm,
who had read it,
mhm,
and we were like, "Oh, you read it?" And we started
mhm.
talking, and they were very passionate about it. So, obviously a lot of people understand there's a model for living, and if there's a model for living inside and you're seeking that and it makes sense and you feel a calling, then that's what I mean, like it's very inspiring. And so
Right.
they wanted their adaptation of it. And so I would hold spaces. I had a really big clinic in King City
Mhm.
for only a year before my entire life fell apart. but
Gotcha.
but I had that there, and so they would have weekly meetings to discuss, who was buying land or how they were working this out.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a ways away, and I'll reread a couple of them every now and again. So for those who don't know, who've joined us, each book, the first book you have to get through. I actually found the first there beautiful. I found the first book a little dry at the beginning, where
It's a little slow.
it's a little slow.
But I think honestly you hit like page 4 and it starts to ramp up because for those of you guys who don't know, if I can jump in and explain a little bit, it's this Russian entrepreneur named Vladimir Megre, and he is sailing up and down the Ob River in Siberia, and he has a trading fleet of ships. And actually what's interesting is one of the people who's working with us now, who's our translator for these events that we do with our friends from Russia. She actually was on one of those boats in the 90s. She's from a remote Siberian village. And so she
Wow.
confirmed that all that stuff was real and everything. But anyway, um, Vladimir Megre, he was sailing up and down the Ob River, trading goods with the locals in these remote Siberian villages. And then one day he meets these two elders. And this is like, page 4 or 5, 6 of the book. And they start telling him about this magical sacred tree that they found deep in the taiga in the Siberian forest. And it's called a ringing cedar. And they're unbelievably rare. And they have these incredible healing powers and stored up energy from the universe. And they start telling him about how the cedar is created by God to store the cosmic energy and then give it back to man. And that they ask him to come and cut this ringing cedar because it's stored up so much energy that it starts to ring, and you can hear like an audible electric line sound. And so what happens is he's not able to do it, but he gets so curious about what they tell him that he eventually comes back to meet them again. And when he comes back to meet them, he winds up meeting their granddaughter, who is Anastasia. And she takes him deep into the taiga where she lives, and her family has lived probably for millennia out there, separate from society. And she's basically a survivor of, you could say, it's called the Vegrus civilization, but even deeper than that, she's somebody with genetic memory all the way back to, the first man, back in the beginning of creation. Like her people have lived separately from human society all the way from that time. So she's preserved all these wonderful abilities and incredible consciousness and purity. And she shares with Vladimir all these things about man and the universe and creation and God and raising children in the image of God and man's true spiritual purpose and all these things. And so that's kind of where the books start. There's a lot more than that. But then she takes him um, for a few days in the beginning, the first time they meet, and she shares with him all these wonderful truths about the universe and life and love and raising children and man's purpose with nature and co-creation and all these things. And she asks him to write a book. And to your point, you mentioned the quote earlier, Amanda. She says, in the book you're going to write, there will be unobtrusive combinations, formulations made up of letters, and they will arouse in the majority of people good and radiant feelings, capable of overcoming ailments of body and soul, and it will facilitate the birth of a new awareness inherent in people of the future. Believe me, Vladimir, this is not mysticism. It is in accord with the laws of the universe. And so he goes out and he writes these books to fulfill his promise to Anastasia. And so much more happens. That's just the beginning of it. We can go more into it if you like, but he winds up writing 10 books and they become international bestsellers. Now there's 30 million plus copies sold in, I don't know, close to 30 languages at this point, and
Yeah.
people have read them all over the world. It spawned a giant movement, which we're probably going to wind up talking about here. And
Hmm.
yeah, that's kind of the introduction to it.
And that series artwork that you showed, I have
Mm,
that artwork, but the original had these beautiful pieces of
yeah.
hand-drawn art that
Hmm.
those also seemed very powerful and different. And I was miffed that I couldn't get my hands on a print, a
If you
full.
want, I
You
can
yeah,
tell you where to get the prints. And
I would
actually,
love
we're
that.
going to start reprinting them. My friend owns that entire original painting series. And we're going to start reprinting them and
Wow.
distributing them through the foundation. I can show you where to get them now, though. I wish I have
Okay,
them
I
all. I
would
have them
love a
all over my
playset.
house. I wish I had them here.
Yes, well, I know I actually still have my old set packed because I moved
Okay.
in October, and I don't have bookshelves enough to put everything away nicely yet.
Hmm.
And I was like, "Where's my set? Where's my set?" But but the other thing about that, there was a controversy when, I was talking among the kin domain that was forming out of this.
Mm.
There was a controversy because they had said that it was edited, or the writings from the first original that was then
Yeah.
went through an edit, and the
Hmm.
people who said they wrote that they read the first one, it was different, and they were upset about the
Yeah.
changes.
Yeah.
And I hadn't got a chance to go through and compare what the changes were, which
Hmm.
do you know anything about
Oh,
that?
I know a lot about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can shed some light on that for anyone who's curious. And so basically, there was a third edition. Actually, I happen to have one of them here that was released. The one I just showed you
Oh, yes.
earlier is the second edition, and the
Yeah.
ones with the paintings on them are the first edition. And basically, the third edition, they had another translator come and do it. And they issued a new copyright for the books. The author wound up self-publishing these third edition books. And what's interesting is that my wife speaks Russian, and I wound up buying her a bunch of the books in Russian. And so there was a couple little parts where she'd pull me over and she'd say like, "Hey, like this little thing is kind of different from the English version." And they weren't major things from what we noticed. Like at one point in the Russian version, they mentioned US dollars, and then in the English version, they changed it to rubles for some reason.
Mhm.
And it's kind of unexplainable and they don't footnote it.
Mm.
But from what I understand from all my Russian speaking friends, is that they say that the English translation is good. It kind of, and for anyone listening, I don't want you to think that the book is in any way not good or not going to be powerful when you read it, because otherwise I wouldn't be here and Amanda we wouldn't be talking about it. But yeah, there are a couple little changes. I think maybe once Vladimir found out about it, he probably wasn't very happy because some of the changes seemed kind of arbitrary. Um, but some people are saying it's probably like 80% there, 85, 90% ish. It's not as good as the original Russian, but then again, it's pretty hard. So I'm actually looking to negotiate the publishing deal with them very soon. Like very, very soon, we're gonna have that conversation and sort it all out. And I'm prepared to reprint the books through the Anastasia Foundation, retranslate them, have a more faithful translation with no edits, better footnotes and all kinds of things. So yeah, we're working on that
Wonderful. Wow. So it sounds like there was a lost in translation issue more than
a
anything,
bit.
not something. Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if it was
Hmm.
like malicious intention, but there are some other
Hmm.
things too where at the end of this book, this is the 10th book, he's talking about, Vladimir Megre is talking about that some people were using his name without his permission, or there's like websites like that use his name, or there's a company called Ringing Cedars of Russia, but it's not
Yeah.
actually like these guys from Russia. So it's kind of misleading. And some people think it's them. It's a small, it's kind of a thing. I happen to be way too into these things because this is my life. I know too much about it. But yeah.
So some of the interesting things that I found that stayed with me throughout the years
Mm,
is, some of the things that I read would be where she was one with the animals, and
yeah.
she had a baby with Vladimir
Yep.
as well, and she would lay in the den with the bear, and she would go off and do her foraging and so forth while the baby would
Right.
sleep with a mama bear, basically, and just the interactions with nature I found very interesting and
Hmm.
thought provoking. Have did we have a different relationship with animals at one
Yeah.
point, and what have we lost as far as our capabilities and our higher senses,
Right.
and our ability to communicate without words?
Right.
Um, and then you may want to talk more about it, but the method of things like planting seeds also
Hmm.
extremely powerful, and I do
Yeah.
that to this day. um,
Amazing.
Taking the seeds, soaking them in the mouth for 9 minutes, or well, first you offer them to the world, the sun and the moon,
Hmm.
and you offer them to the sky, and you set intentions, and you put them in your mouth. And I remember the first time we did it, we actually did a workshop, and we taught the method, and everyone planted their own seeds to take home, and they would
That's
wash
awesome.
their bodies to water with. And
Hmm.
for those who don't know, this is a method in which to imprint your DNA to the seeds. There's a communication, and
Right.
it'll make your own medicine, or it'll
Yeah.
tailor itself to you. There's a reciprocal relationship going on
Yeah.
there.
What she says is that, and that's really cool that you brought it up because it's such a practical thing from the books that people can just do right now. And so Anastasia describes a method of planting seeds where you put the seeds in your mouth under your tongue for 9 minutes, and that imprints your all the information about the condition of your body. And to preface this, she says that planting seeds in this way will cure every disease that you have. It doesn't matter what it is. She says if you have a very big garden, you only need a few plants planted in this way to do the job. And a lot of people can attest to the power of it. I can attest to the power of it. It's incredibly powerful. And so what she says is that when you plant these seeds in this way, is that they will bring up from the ground all the nutrients and minerals that your body needs to treat your specific conditions. It's a tailor-made, natural, biological medicine just for you for your condition right now. And so hard to find something that's so specifically formulated for you, right? And basically, you put the seeds under your mouth for 9 minutes, and then you take them out. You breathe your warm breath on them.
Yes.
You're standing outside on the ground in the spot where you're going to plant them barefoot, and you hold it up to the stars or the sky for a few moments to allow them to take in the cosmic rays, and then you plant them in a hole. I think you spit inside the hole. Maybe that's optional, but then you plant them and they grow, and you can plant a regular tomato and then plant a tomato like that next to each other. They're not the same tomato. I remember the first time I ate a plant that was grown that way. It was actually a tomato, and it was just it was just one tomato that had gotten ripe. When I went to pick it, and I ate it, and I had this tremendous surge of energy go through my whole body, and everywhere was just vibrating, and it was really powerful. It hit me like a truck. And it was just one little tomato. Um, so yeah,
Wow. And that's
yeah,
also, if you're teaching children, and she
yep,
goes into a lot about children and homeschooling or proper schooling
a
and
lot.
childbirth, natural childbirth, and really important things. But one of the things that you can do is you'll always use simple experiments with your children. So,
Hmm.
like with Dr. Emoto, we would do the rice, where you say very
Yep,
negative things to one of rice in a jar and positive things to the other same rice, in a jar, and one will rot very quick that you've sworn at or whatnot, and the one that you
yep,
give love to stays fresh. And so it's the same kind of concept where you can do just a regular seed in the ground, and then the seed that the child, soaks in their
yeah,
mouth. And so they can have that really powerful
right,
connection to nature at a very young age, and that will stay with them, and I think
mm,
that's a really beautiful thing to do
right.
with your family.
Yeah, Anastasia, she talks so much about raising children and the relationship, the purpose of the communication between man and plants and nature. And she basically describes nature as God's materialized thoughts, right? She says God has taken a material form throughout the entire universe through the creations of nature. And she says by understanding, you know, nature, by understanding and communicating with the materialized thoughts of God, you will come to understand God and be one with God, right? And so, she talks a lot about that, and especially raising children. Maybe we can start to get into like the idea of the kins domain and everything. So um, basically, there's so much that Anastasia talks about in the series. I'd recommend you guys go read. But eventually, by book 4, she starts talking about an idea called the kins domain, and this winds up being one of the central, if not the most central, ideas of the series, along with some other thoughts about mankind's purpose. She says, man was created for conjoint creation and joy for all from its contemplation, is what she says. She actually says these are the words of God when God was creating the universe and God was creating man. This is very interesting. And she, how does the joy for all part come into being? And the answer winds up being birth, right? And the birth of something new, of a new co-creation, and that winds up being children ultimately. She talks about man being made in the image of God, and how do we, if we go back to the beginning, what did God do in the beginning of the universe? Well, he thought of this whole existence, and he manifested this dream, which is visible as matter in us, and basically he created this green earthly paradise with all the trees and the water and the plants and the animals and everything, and then he put us here. He gave birth to us from his being and put us here to enjoy and live in harmony with nature, and to take this nature and perfect it more and more and more, and live a life happily hand in hand with him forever. That was what we were here to do, and just create joy and beauty everywhere around us and throughout the whole universe. um, and so she talks about this, and basically how man can live the happiest life, how man can overcome all the struggles of the world, how we can. And when I say man, that's obviously not like, like men. It's
Well,
all of
actually,
us.
I like that. I like
Yeah.
that she did that, because ever
Yeah.
since I and she talks about it, don't we're not human, we are
Right.
man. We are our
Yep.
kind is man. Like,
Man.
that's what we are. We are man as
Man.
and when the way she said it, it's like, yeah, that's
Yep.
right. That's
Yep.
our correct name. That's what we are. And we are mankind, and we are man, and it has nothing to do with sex.
Yep, it has nothing to do with sex, and she says, "Man, we are man," because, she says it this way, because we are this living, thinking, conscious being that's beyond the body. We are this wonderful consciousness that is us, and that is man. Doesn't have anything to do with the body you're inhabiting. And man is kind of resembles God in that sense, because he's a consciousness too, only just much more perfected than we are, or in our present state, right? And so he has feelings, and it's just like us, but he just doesn't have a body like we do. His body is the whole universe, as how she describes it. He didn't take form for himself. um so she describes all these things, and the Kins domain basically is a 2.5 acre piece of land. And right, so let me explain why it's 2.5 acres. It's 2.5 acres so you can directly interact with everything that's growing there. The key is that you have a direct interaction with the plant world, with the materialized thoughts of God, and you have a direct connection with this entire piece of land. And so kin's domain, what does this name mean? Well, it's the domain of your kin, right? So it's a place where you settle your family line, right? You take this place and you say, I'm going to bring, all the generations of my family, all my ancestors, and settle them here on this spot. And I'm going to pass this land down to my kin. I'm going to create this beautiful green paradise living home for myself and the people I love, and I will pass it down, right? And so basically the kin's domain, there's so much to say about it because it's such a wonderfully complex idea. But It's this 2.5 acre piece of land, and you start with planting a living fence, right? And so it's trees, it's bushes, and all these things. And this thing can become poetically beautiful. It can be, lilac bushes, cedar trees, birch trees, rowan trees, and just this magical paradise like fence, living fence that serves you and is beautiful and is also productive and can give you berries and things like that. So you fence it off with this living fence, and then you take part of that land for a forest. 50 to 75%, she says, should be reserved for a forest. You have a pond. You have some. She gives like a basic way of an example of how to make a kins domain. She says you can have living structures made out of trees, densely planted together, like a gazebo that you make out of trees. You can have some enclosures in the forest for chickens and some goats or whatever made out of trees. You can have a little summer sleeping area made out of densely planted trees. You plant your vegetable garden, you plant a orchard, you plant a flower garden, you have beehives, you have all these things, and now you've wound up with this beautiful green paradise, right? You build your house, and the way she describes it is that the house aspect of it is not that's not technically the whole home. The home is the whole space, right? And what and Amanda, if you want to jump in at any point, I can go on this for a while. So you
Yeah,
just let me
actually,
know.
just keep going. I have to,
Yeah.
I realize I have to plug in my little internet thing. I don't want to lose you. So just keep
So
talking while I do that. Just a
let's
second.
do that.
All
Okay,
right.
cool. Yeah.
Go
So
ahead.
yeah, yeah. So you have the 2.5 acres of land, and let me see where my point was. You have the 2.5 acres, you've dug your pond, you have the home. The 2.5 acres is the home. And what she talks about is creating a space of love, right? So there's a very interesting idea in the books where she talks about what is true spirituality, right? Is true spirituality in her point of view is taking the love and the goodness and the light that you feel in your heart and giving it a material embodiment in the world, in creation, in something that's eternal. So you can take the goodness and the love that you feel inside of you, and you use that to inspire you to create this place, right? This space of love, as she calls it, this kins domain, right? Space of love doesn't only have to be a kins domain, but basically, she ideally, there's a man and a woman, they fall in love, and they take that love, that initial spark of love, and they say we're going to create this space together, right? And we're going to give a material embodiment to our love that we feel in our hearts. So we design this beautiful space together, and then in that inspiration we plant the trees, we plant the flowers, we build the home, we dig the pond, and we are materializing our consciousness, our love. And now we've created a space of love, as Anastasia calls it. Why is it called a space of love? It's because this is a place that meets the conditions for love to stay forever. So she talks about, why does love vanish from families, right? This is a very practical problem that we're all facing. Like, people fall in and out of love, families separate, children don't grow up in happy environments. I certainly didn't. You know what I mean? Many of us here did not. And why does this happen? It's because love isn't invited into the home. It doesn't have a place to stay. There's too much chaos. We live in these apartments, and we don't even have the same aspirations in life, and we don't really know where we're going together. And so this vision, this kins domain vision, this ringing cedars vision is a couple aspires to creating this kins domain together and saying, we're going to create this place, this beautiful paradise, and then we're going to have children here. Or you're going to bring your children there, right? I know many people who bring their children there already, and they live there in this beautiful place, and we're going to give birth to children here. And the beautiful thing is that she talks about, how do we want our children to be born? Do we want them to be born as a deliberate co-creation between, like, the man and the woman, or as a consequence of fleshly lust and passion? And that's the choice that we make as a society. We have two ways of doing it. And basically, everyone would want to grow up in the kids domain if you had the choice, because that child grows up and he takes his first looks at the world and he's like, wow, my mom and my dad did all this for me. Look at that. And look at the society that that child grows up in and the consciousness that they grow up in. They grow up in this beautiful place where they can interact with all the nature. It's bountiful. There's fruit trees, nut trees, there's animals. The sounds are beautiful. It's clean, it's healthy. Um, and this is, you wind up creating a whole nother civilization. And so what happens, she introduces the idea of the kin's domain, right? And then that evolves into a kin's domain settlement where you have many families coming together to each create their own space of love for their family. And so in Russia, where this all started, there's over like 500 settlements. So you imagine the biggest of them are like 350 families. And I know I got a lot of sunlight on me right now.
It's fine.
Yeah.
It looks okay.
All right, cool. So, wow, it's bright. But anyway, in Russia, there's over 500 settlements. Each family has their own hectare, their own 2.5 acres. The largest of them have like 350 families, maybe more. And so you imagine how many trees are planted, the kind of society that creates. It's a separate way of living. Many of the viewers here would probably be aware of that World Economic Forum article. You will, yeah.
You
See your
own nothing
face.
and be
Yeah,
happy.
you'll own
Yeah.
nothing and be happy. And remember in that article, they're talking about, you know, at the end, they talk about people who have gone and formed their own self-sustaining communities. They've taken the people who couldn't take that, the robots were taking over our jobs and all that stuff. The people who all the technology was too much for them, they go form self-sustaining communities. And to me, the Kins domain and the Kins domain settlement is like the ultimate embodiment of this. Each family has their own space for them. It's unbelievably abundant, like no question. They wind up creating their own economy, their own society, their own culture. And the beautiful thing is that everybody is inspired by the same idea. You don't have to like convince people of this. Everybody wants to do it. That's why the movement is growing so fast in Russia. There's, over 500, settlements, and they're all united by the same philosophy. You can't really say the same thing for like an eco village kind of model. You know what I mean? And they're different.
Right. Yeah, I take issue with a lot of eco villages because I believe that everyone needs their own space as well. They need their own personal space, private space, that feeling that it's their own thing. And
Yeah.
then you have your community. I
Right.
don't know if I'm breaking up there.
No, I hear you. I hear you
just close to
perfectly.
the mic. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. So, yes, I'm just making sure it's not my end. Okay. So, but that because that was one of the things that when I was thinking about community and forming community, I was like, well, I really want my own kitchen and my own, want my own space, right? I don't want to be trampled on all the time. I don't want boundary issues.
Totally.
And energy needs to be specific and, that sort of thing.
Right.
And so that was one of the things but after I read the series, it did, my thinking altered. And what's fascinating is how I went through the rest of my life after reading that. I ended up doing this because I had a conscious conception because I knew that I wanted to do that. If I was going to have a baby, I wanted to have a conscious conception. Amazing. So I did that with my partner. I had a home water birth, completely no medical personnel at all. I was a full moon. I was back and forth inside, outside the house. I was barefoot on the ground. I was, as outside as I could be in November in Ontario. And then I just moved, as I was saying, and it's all to do with my daughter and her kin forward, the forward moving. And so I have acreage, I have forest, and I have my 2.5 acre garden. And it's like, and it, it just dawned on me that I think that was part of the reading of the series. It just got into me, it got underneath
Mm,
me. And some part of it resonated deeply inside maybe even my subconscious, where my goals were being motorized subtly. My decisions were being influenced subtly by the knowledge, right?
mm.
So that's quite a fascinating revelation, actually.
Yeah, a lot
Now,
of people, I was going to say a lot of people wind up having that same experience where the books wind up, confirming a lot of things that they had previously thought, or giving them more clarity to something that they were already planning to do with their life, living on the land and things like that. The books give a very good, the best blueprint for all that stuff.
fascinating. Now, with this, so tell me a little bit more about how it got to you, how it
Yeah,
affected you to get to this, to the point where you're an executive director of the foundation now, and
yeah, it's a long
it's
journey.
embedded. Yeah, I can imagine.
I've got
So
her
what
right
did it
here behind
just,
me. Yeah.
yeah. So you have that support, but it's fascinating that you're here now, and I believe the position for you was within the year or so. Am I
So
correct in that?
basically, yeah, I've been doing this work since about 2014. When I read the books, I immediately got started with community organizing, and organizing the readership of the books and supporting and things like that. But
Mhm.
we didn't really officially become a foundation until September of 2021. Um, and basically, I had been slightly inactive for a little while before about a year ago. Um, got to thank my wife for lighting a fire in me, and a bunch of other people were asking me to come back and be more active than I was already being. Um, but yeah, my whole story with the books is I read them in 2014. I heard a spiritual teacher that I was following at the time mention the Siberian master Anastasia. He said, the Siberian master Anastasia, and those words stuck with me. I said, Siberian master Anastasia, who is this? And um, I look up Siberian master Anastasia, and I wind up finding Ringing Cedars of Russia books. And I read all the testimonials on the website, and I say, okay, I need these. I get them. And the same as you, Amanda, I wind up devouring them super quick. I read the first 8 books in like 2 weeks, I think. Just was nonstop reading. I'm not a speed reader, but I guess it was pretty fast. And right halfway through book one, this book right here again, I was just looking at the book and I realized that it found such an undistorted source of truth. Like when you read these books, it's not like anyone's trying to manipulate anything, or there's any spiritual mumbo jumbo that doesn't make sense, or it's like an ego motivated thing, or it's hard to understand or something. It's the clear truth. It's so clear and undistorted. And I was amazed because I'd already been through most of the spiritual teachings of the world and things, and nothing had ever been as clear to me as these. And I was like, finally, I found something that was just so clear. And I felt like I understood Anastasia really deeply, and I just decided right then and there to just dedicate my life to it. And so we started doing events. It started with a little free forum, where it was just a discussion forum, and because I had grown up on the internet, I was very tech savvy, spent a lot of time on forums. In 2014, there was no place to go and discuss the Ringing Cedars online. I tried to find it. There was no Facebook group. There was no anywhere to connect with anyone, which was crazy because the books had already been published for 8 years. There had been some stuff before, it had gone away. There was no community. Uh, Anyone who was doing it were in isolated pockets, and no one knew each other all over the world, really, like the whole English speaking world, the rest of the world. And so I started with a little website, and that evolved into eventually doing readers gatherings and things like that. Like in 2016, we did an event with Vladimir Megre. We had him come. I used to work at a nonprofit. We did events at the UN all the time, and basically we had him come to the UN for this beautiful summit conference. And yeah, we did this event with him, and I was doing events, and the online community started to grow. We started a Facebook group, and now we've got our own social network thing all these years later. We've got a very, the largest English speaking Ringing Cedars Facebook group. We've got a very active Telegram chat. It's the largest Ringing Cedars Telegram chat. And it's just the beginning. We've barely started to scratch the surface. I did all this part-time. We've built a really large and wonderful and supportive community. We do all kinds of events, virtual events. Every week we've got something going on. We've got a program called the Russia-America Exchange Program, where we speak with our Russian brothers and sisters who have decades of experience on these KINS domains, because we don't really have large KINS domain settlements in North America or really the West like they have in Russia. They're very successful in Russia. And so we speak with them, and we, get to share their wisdom with us. And so we have this program, which I'm really happy about. We do all kinds of things. We're speaking private society stuff, like you said in the beginning. We're doing an event in either end of July or first week of September with the American Meeting Group and Ron Gibson, talking about land patents for KINS domain settlements. So anybody who's into land patents and who wants to live any kind of off-grid life, not just a KINS domain thing, you'd probably be interested in that event. So we're doing all kinds of things to educate our people on, private law and private living and land rights. And we do a lot, all kinds of events. We're going to be doing a few in-person gatherings this year, and pretty soon we'll most likely be publishing the books. So I'm most excited about that, retranslating and republishing the books. And that's our work. It's just a very big community trying to connect and inspire all the Ringing Cedars readers everywhere. So it's cool because as I get into things, I start to meet people like you, and I don't know that you're a Ringing Cedars reader because we don't really, just doesn't get brought up in whatever reason. It was so cool to connect with you. And even when because we met in the Alpha Vedic Telegram chat. And, for those who may or may not know Alpha Vedic, Mike Winter, I was in the Telegram chat, and he's like, "Oh, Dr. Lando introduced me to the books." And I didn't know that any of these guys were into the Ringing Cedars, and so I just keep meeting people everywhere who are Ringing Cedars readers and never really heard him mention it. So it's really cool to me.
Yeah, I used to wear a piece of a Ringing Cedar
The
on my
Siberian cedar.
chest. Yeah, for a long, long time till I wore the string down. And and then there's a company, I don't know, maybe if they're authentic or whatever, they seem to be, and they sell the pine nuts. This was the only company I could actually get any turpentine, anything from. There you go.
Yeah, Siberian cedar cone.
There, they have those. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I would purchase the pine nut oil, beautiful little glass jars, and then there would be different percentages of turpentine in the oil.
Yep.
But I'd always get the highest amount of turpentine. And then I couldn't get it into Canada anymore.
Oh yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I was having all kinds of trouble, so I stopped for a while. But recently we've been communicating with them again. We're going to try again and see if we can get it through. But that knowledge spread obviously to health products and what we eat, what we grow, what we do. And so that's really exciting that you were able to put something together that seems stable.
Right.
Because as all inspired ideas go, it will invite all different types of people. And one of the things that Dean Clifford and I talk about a lot, and he mentioned in the last podcast we did, people have to have some level of self-responsibility first if they're going into agreements like that. They have to bring something into the scenario rather than just, want to be helped or.
You mean forming a community, like a KINS domain settlement? Yeah.
Right. There should be value offered, and skill sets offered and that sort of thing for it to really be harmonious. So there has to be a level of maturity taught. And of course we are retraining adults that I do it all the time.
Yeah.
Whilst, a lot of adults are very they're like in their child trauma still. So they look adult, but
Yep.
inside they're like a traumatized child walking around. They never got their
Right.
needs met.
Yep.
So there's a lot of reforming of that to do, but also then to create the children to raise them appropriately so they feel they can offer skill sets and that sort of thing.
Indeed.
And the
It's a big
schooling
thing.
aspect is really fascinating. That she talks about. I think what was it? Book 8, book 7, book 8. What
This
was
is
the schooling?
book 3 where she starts talking
Oh,
about
it
the
was, but there
education.
was one book that goes into it even more, I thought, later on.
Book 3 introduces the idea of the kind of schooling that she's talking about. It was an academician for our audience here, named Mikhail Shatinin, and
Oh, yes.
he recently passed away a couple years ago. But yeah, he was a she said that the schools of the future on the Kins domain settlements of the future would be things inspired by his methods. There was a school built in Russia. It was designed and built and painted by the children. You guys look up the photos of it,
It's
Shatinin
gorgeous.
School. It is the most beautiful building like the most beautiful buildings you'll ever see. Um, Stunning, stunning. Um,
Can you spell the name for people so they can look it up?
yeah. So Mikhail, Mikhail, and then Shetinin, Schetenin. And then the school was called like the Tekos School. That's the place in Russia where it was Tekos. So if you look up all that, you should find it. Um, yeah, I mean, there's so much to say there, though. What you're talking about, something you reminded me of what you were just talking about with the people trying to bring skills rather than feeling like they have to have something given to them out of this sense of entitlement or that they need to be taken care of or something. Um, and back to your point about the feeling that everybody needs their own space, right? In a community, is that I want to make a more clear distinction between what a kin's domain and what a kin's domain settlement is versus like an eco village, right?
Mhm.
Because us in the West, we are very, introduced or very familiar with this idea of an eco village, and it's normally very communal, right? It is you have a communal meal, or there's a lot of communal activities and communal sharing of effort and work and things like that. No disrespect, by the way, to anybody who's living that way, because you're doing something that's better than how we're living in the cities. Um, but so this communal aspect doesn't really exist in a kin's domain settlement because each family has their hectare. They are growing everything for themselves, and generally, when they have an abundance, they share or they trade with their neighbors. Like I went to Russia in 2016, and I saw this happening all over the place. I went to one of the oldest and biggest settlements there, and the barter economy there is very active, but every family kind of has their own dedicated space for them. And the main thing is that each family is coming there to create the intention for why they join is different. They don't necessarily just want to join a community, right? Like they don't, it's not just about that. It's that they want to create a space for their family, for their kin, a space of love for themselves to hand down generationally, like forever, to have a piece of the motherland, as Anastasia calls it, for themselves. And then each family has that desire and they all come together with their individual desire. And so, it is an issue that people have to face where some people feel that, other people need to be doing more work or, I deserve this or entitled to that. And it's kind of an issue, but less so in the Kins domain settlements. But I have heard from some people that it can be a challenge. But, you know, I would say, yeah, everybody has to do their own work internally to get to that point. And hopefully you're around a community of people. If you have a good heart, they want to lift you up or lift the person up. I wouldn't say we have to exclude people. Maybe sometimes people need a little bit of a hand, you know.
Mhm.
But it's an
Absolutely.
important point about the eco village and Kins domain thing because they're not the same. It's a
Yes.
whole different model. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, and I think that's why that group that was using my space, that I wasn't ready for that. I was building my own health community. So
Hmm.
I was working on how do you heal a lot of people model, which has then
Yeah.
taken me 15 years to figure out really. But So that was where my mind, but I would witness it and I would watch it from afar. So I got that observer aspect. And
Hmm.
one of the things I noticed was it automatically started forming into a hierarchy where
Mm.
there were a few dominant personalities who wanted to lead and direct and decide. And I think the issue was that they were trying to pool their money to buy land together to create their domains.
Hmm.
And there was infighting and issue over that. And that
Yeah.
was what ultimately led to them just really just falling away from it. So that can be difficult when you want good neighbors.
Right. You
um,
want to live with these people.
Ultimately, and
Yeah.
yet now you have to collaborate and make agreements and basically private contracts with each other
Yep.
in this proper spirit of it, rather than in a curmudgeon way or whatnot, that
Yeah.
where egos happen and that sort of thing. So I think
Right.
that's one thing that can happen. But then if it's done where it's more organically happen. Now, I thought in Russia, and if I'm not correct, please correct me,
Sure.
but I thought that in the books there was a political process that was
Hmm.
involved, and they
Yeah.
actually got the parliament in Russia to gift
It's a
everyone,
very good
every
point.
man, woman, every family, the 2.5 acre lot given to the
This is
families. Is
true.
that correct?
This is true. So yeah, in Russia, and to preface this little point is that their political system is different from ours. For those who know the history of the real American political system, about the republic and the democracy and all that stuff. Their political system is different. And so Anastasia and her grandfather, when Anastasia is talking about the King's domain for the first time, she says, the first step is finding take a piece of land in a place that is, with a climate that's suitable to you, and take this place in perpetuity, right? And Vladimir says to her, like, well, you can't just go up to a place and take a piece of land. You can't just do that. And he says, not everybody can buy land either. And she says, yeah, everybody is born on their great motherland, but they have no piece of it to call their own, right? And so she says, if there is no way for people to get a motherland, um, you need to find a way out of all the existing favorable laws. You have to find a way to get the government to give people land. And he says, well, there is no laws and there's no party. And she says, well, you should create such a party, and you should create such a law that would give people 2.5 acres of land upon request for lifetime use, with rights to inheritance and everything like that. And so they did create a political party called the Family Party, Rodnaya Partia, which is like family land party, motherland party. Um, and basically, the party actually dissolved. There were some things, but they made a lot of progress anyway. Um, Laws have been passed in Russia. And so there's a lot of things that get said about Russia. I'm not going to say I'm pro Russia or whatever. I'm just going to tell you some laws that have been passed in Russia, right? And so one of the laws, this law on Kin's domains, it started in the Far East. They started a program where anyone living in the Far East region could get 2.5 acres of land with all these conditions for free from the government, right? And then they brought it, even before that, they brought it to one of the regions, like one of the states of Russia, you would say Belgorod. Belgorod actually is the only state in Russia so far that has passed a law on Kin's domains, and they're actively supporting the development of Kin's domain settlements there. So they're giving out land to all of their citizens for free to start these settlements, and actually, I recently read on one of the Russian social media things that they just brought the law to the Duma and to pass this law on the national level. And so, like, this is happening right now. I think as of earlier this month or late March, they have brought this Kin's domain law to the entire Russian government to pass this law and then give out land to everybody. And
Wow.
yeah, and so it's in the Duma right now. It's already been passed in one of the regions and the Far East. Some of the people that we're speaking with in this Russia America exchange program, they are a young couple who founded a settlement based on the land that they were given from the government. It's like 300 acres they were given. to just to just give it to a bunch of families and do that. So it's all that stuff is happening.
It's brilliant because that energy is addictive, is desirable. All it takes is for a family who's struggling to see that,
Yep.
and they want that, and then they will say, well, here, you may have that, and then there you are. It's
You know,
problem solved.
Anastasia positions it as the solution to all world crisis in every way, political, social, economic. I mean, if somebody, the interesting thing is that even before the government started supporting it, people who were even like the poorest of the poor were doing what they could to get their land and by any means necessary, and to go and start these communities and live there. And hundreds of these settlements appeared before the government even supported anything, you know? And it's because people are hungry for that, and that's what's going to give them true self-sufficiency. Like whoever owns your land and your food, controls you. If you don't control your land and your food, you're doing what somebody else says. You're making money somehow to get the land and get the food until you've got it yourself. And that's the thing, is that you have true freedom when you have it. And so if the government's giving it and they're giving it with no condition, then what more could you ask for? Now that sets a path for the rest of humanity. For the rest of humanity. And like, yeah, there's hundreds of these settlements, and people who don't have anything can just start with their land, and they're supported by their community, and it develops. And yeah,
It's interesting that you're communicating with people there, just,
quite a lot.
considering considering the current political wag the dog situation going on now. Um, and
Yeah.
it's so that you're getting a little more accurate information about
Yeah.
what's really happening on the ground.
Hmm.
And also, like, Dean is very supportive of Russia as well. We were talking about it, and he said that they keep voting Putin in because
Yeah,
they actually like him. they
this
they
is true.
actually like his policies and his way of standing up for them against bullies like the United States and so forth.
Yep.
Um, and so they verified that they
Yeah,
like
yeah.
him.
So I've heard that from a lot of my Russian friends. I won't say it's universally true, but there's
Hmm.
definitely support for him. He's gone on the record a couple times specifically about King's domains and voicing support for them. Um, the federal government, they even did this thing. I saw the website myself maybe like 2 years ago, because they're giving out all this land, the 2.5 acre pieces. They did this thing where they developed all these business plans where it was like organic strawberry thing or beekeeping or mushroom growing in the forest. And they gave like fully developed natural business plans to everyone on this website. And it was all these different viable business models in great detail for anyone who wanted to start from the beginning. You know what I
Wow.
mean? And
Yeah.
it's a government funded program. Where in the United States would you hear of something like that happen?
No,
It's
never.
so it's crazy. And so I think that you know, I'm not gonna make any wild speculation. It's just that there's a lot, the future of humanity is coming out of Russia. I'll say that. It's coming out of Russia right now. And the surrounding countries like Belarus, Ukraine, there's a lot of settlements there too. This movement is gaining so much steam. Um, but yeah, so what we're trying to do, because I realized I didn't even mention this, is that hundreds of thousands, if not maybe millions of copies have been sold in English, and we're trying to connect and inspire all the people who have read the books and want to create settlements. Everything we're doing is to the end goal of creating King's domain settlements. You know, so that's what we're about, basically.
That's great because, as we just said, that solves the issues. If the
Yeah,
governments can be parlayed and can be, um, uh, you know, fandangled into doing this, because there's so much land in Canada. I mean, it's ridiculous. Vanguard can't buy it all.
no,
Okay,
BlackRock, Vanguard can't do it.
they can't do it. So to give away some of the, and apparently the crown is actually of no concern any longer, really, or have been defunct for a long time. And
Interesting.
so the land is reverts back. It's not really crown anything.
Mm,
We can make claims on it, even as serfs or, so the same thing as Anastasia
this is
says, like
interesting.
you can
This
actually
is like a
claim it.
lodial title on your land, but in Canada. I know a lot about
Yeah.
this in the United States, but not in Canada. So my community has been very interested in the Canadian solutions for this.
Yeah. Well, we can still do, yeah, Lloydal title is important and it can be done, and there's different groups doing it. One group's doing it like the In Power movement, that
Mhm.
aspect, and they're doing it really by the book and on paper and very tightly done so it would stand in any court, and they're testing that over and over
Amazing.
again. And then there's the easier way where you basically just change your status by controlling your person, and then,
Yep.
no thank you, please don't represent me. You can get, your mining rights and the air rights, and that you had mentioned
Yep.
earlier.
Like the land patent stuff.
The patent stuff, it's apparently still gray area around it, whether
Mhm.
they can do anything about it, or if they ignore it, or that sort of thing. Like, what if they send a drone into
Right.
how
How
are
do
you
you
going?
enforce it? Yeah.
Exactly. I am going to finally talk to Christopher James. He wants to talk to me about germ theory, but I'm going to ask him some questions, um, about. So I think once the kin domains and this takes off and it's established,
Mhm.
we will be able to have common law again. Um,
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
because we can't now, really, we can't now,
Right.
but that's okay. We still have to prepare for our
Yep.
law again, our own law for ourselves and for our peers and that sort of thing. So I think that's where his
Absolutely.
work will be most valued when we get to that place, in hopefully in our lifetimes.
Yeah, I believe so in our lifetime that we'll see it. I think that with the republishing of the books, it's going to spur an incredible second wave of the Ringing Cedars movement in the United States and Canada and the rest of the English speaking world. So trying to get that done as fast as possible, but the time is ripe. The community is now so mature and so informed on all these various topics that the mistakes of the people who tried to create communities before, I think are much less likely to be repeated. And an interesting point about what you're saying about the common law governments is that my friend Robert William from AMG, the American Meeting Group, who's doing all this stuff with Ron Gibson and other amazing speakers, he's an amazing law expert, and he tells me, like, the United States Republic government, is basically vacant right now, right? But people can fill all those positions and we can operate our own government. You know what I mean? All of that is there. If only people were there to fulfill the duties and the roles of the government, and we could govern ourselves and be outside of the democratic, the fake democracy, commercial, statutory system. All of that
Yes.
is there. So it just takes knowledge and education, good, solid education, but we can do it. There's no reason we can't.
It's really fascinating that you say that, Gabriel, because I remember when I'd said this before, where I was giving a talk in downtown Toronto. It was a rally, and local politicians were there, and they're trying to gain support for the existing system. And I just looked at it and said, no, there's
Are you
another
kidding?
system. There's
Yeah.
another role for you, and
Mm,
it's what you mentioned, that they need to step into that. So, and as opposed to begging back into a disease, really, and
right.
nothing that you can even make an impact for. I mean, if you're really true in your heart, you want to genuinely help, you want to be a voice for people, and you want to bring people together and deal with, help through conflict and help people communicate and get their services and needs met, that sort of thing. If that's the true job or role of a politician, then it can be done. It can be done in this way, rather than hoping you can say the right buzzwords to get enough pretend votes to get into a useless system that's already
Right.
rigged, that's just hurting everything.
Yeah, that system that's not gonna ultimately bring any benefit to anyone. It's like, how much good is that? How much can we really change that system? You know? it's, it's crazy. And and to go back to the self-governing thing, Rob, who I mentioned earlier, he sees that idea that you have 350 families living on a kins domain settlement. Now you can fulfill the roles of self-governance, right? You have
Yeah.
this other society. And even in the Ringing Cedars books, they talk about, you know, every representative of the Duma in Russia, there should be at least one representative living on it. They should all live on kins domain settlements,
Yeah.
because she says that they cannot pass wise laws if they are engrossed in the technocracy. They are surrounded by this artificial information system all day that completely distorts their perception. They can't think. Their lives are too scheduled and regimented. They can't do anything useful and they're useless. And she says that they should all live on kins domains, right? In harmony with nature, with this great aspiration for co-creation and, lightness of heart and all these things. And then they would be able to actually pass useful laws that would benefit mankind, So why don't we start telling our politicians to do that, right? Because how much can we expect of these people? They're crazy. I mean, or they're just kind of lost and overly negatively influenced.
And when they're in the situation, when they're part of it, they belong, they care for
Yeah,
on a deeper level, on a more meaningful level, rather than being up in the distortions where they're completely out of touch with what's really going on with the
right,
people and in the communities and what the struggles are. And they rely on somebody to tell them, or they rely on some terribly written scientific paper or something like that. And they're not, boots on the ground type of
yeah,
people. And we need that. And those are that's like the true town hall meetings. I mean, they live in the community. They're part of the community. They know who the people are, who, like the Sesame Street song, who are the people in your neighborhood.
right.
You're probably a little bit younger
I
for that,
I
but
was I was I remember that. I was little.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that was embedded in my era. I was born in 1974, and
Mhm,
Sesame Street was everything, right? So it was teaching you that you're neighborly. You have your neighborhood, you have your people in your neighborhood that do things but you interact with them, and it's not a separate entity up in some tower. Um,
mhm. Right.
so I remember that feeling when I read the books about Russia. I was excited for Russia.
Yeah.
I wanted to go. I wanted to be there. I wanted to see it. I wanted to feel it, you know. And so I'm really relieved to hear that, your feedback and that information, what's going on there, that it's still progressing, and it hasn't died away.
No.
It's still flourishing, and it just had to be the right timing. I mean, could we have even imagined? I couldn't have imagined back then that we would be here now in this situation, where there's
No.
an opportunity and a deeper need for people to become self-sufficient, and that even being poor or impoverished could spark it, because they could come
Yeah.
together and rally to government to give the land, or to get the land in other ways, and just
Right.
start building it.
Right. And
It's really,
what I'm grateful for about this time throughout everything that we've been through is that it shows, the time that we're living in now more than ever shows that there's really only two paths for us. It's either the technocracy and the further development of the technocracy and this artificial life system of enslavement and unhappiness and disease and war, or we walk back to the garden and live hand in hand with the creator. These are our options, and it's very black and white, and everyone is choosing now. And what's great about this whole situation we found ourselves in the last couple of years is that it's accelerated people's actions towards either of those paths.
yes,
Unfortunately, some people are choosing, whether consciously or unconsciously, to continue down the path of the technocracy, and we have nothing but love for those people, because those are our brothers and sisters and they're suffering. And then other people are saying, you know what, we got to get out. We have to, I wouldn't say react out of fear and go, create something out of a sense of like urgency and fear. But fast action, well thought action is appropriate sometimes, and should go out and get land, start a kins domain settlement, you know, do this and give yourself that safety and security, because if not now, then when? Maybe a little later is more appropriate. But we really only have two options. And Anastasia talks about the future of Russia, and she gives visions of the future. She can see the future, and she shares these visions of future Russia with Vladimir. She says the future of Russia, the Moscow River will be so clean, um, that people will come from all around the world to drink its water to heal them, and that the city of Moscow is this beautiful, flourishing place. And outside of the city, there's all these kins domain settlements, but there's still people kind of living in the city, right? Like there's still people living the city life. But
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know. I forgot exactly where I was going with that. But yeah.
Well, I mean, it's going to be, as you were saying, you're grateful, for this time because it really
Yeah.
showed the split and it's accelerated decisions and it's moving us to where we need to be. And
Right.
I still hold to what I felt is that there's two worlds in the world. It's used to be there are many worlds within the world, and now it's
Yep.
refining into two, sort of a split. And those people can, if they need the technocracy illusion for whatever that
Sure.
expression is. I mean, if the creator somehow even needs that, we don't know how that serves. We can't know that. And if that's what they need in order to get the piece they need in order to be finished with it, then that's what it has to play out.
Sure.
But
Right.
we don't have to be part of it. We can build forward what we used to have, really, how we used to
Definitely.
live, how we used to flourish, and we can remember who we are through this process, through a connection with the land and with just being one with nature, witnessing nature, and being away from the distortion. So we have clear vision and thought, and our gifts begin to come again. And then things become more peaceful and harmonious. And that becomes its own vibration, that becomes its own separate reality ultimately, because as
Yep.
you know, if the vibrations split too differently, they're like two opposite ends of a magnet. They can't, or two same sides of the magnet, I guess, in the repulsion, right? They can't
Right.
touch each other. So I feel like that's what's happening. We made a decision whether we're going this way or that way, and that's what we're doing and living. And so we can not be so not in fear or worry, like what's going to happen. Are we going to be taken off to camps, or all this kind of fear
Totally.
nonsense? Because no, it's done. You already made your choice. And for those who say, "Oh, I don't have money, or I don't have land, or I feel trapped, or I'm stuck in a city, or whatever," you still made the choice. So that means at some
Yep.
point it will come up for you. A door will open and you'll know. Pack your backpack, off you go. There's an opening for a kin domain. It's
There is
yours,
there
you
is
know?
always a way, there's always a way. And if Anastasia says in the book, she says, whatever dream is held dearly and strongly by the heart will inevitably materialize in reality. And she says, trust me that this is just how things work, Vladimir. And it's like there's always a way. There's no reason you can't. Like Vladimir tells a story in book 10 about a young man. He was like 22, 23. He had no money, had no skills, was just a normal guy, was like drinking and smoking and just living his life. Read the books and decided he wanted to build a kins domain, but he didn't know how, didn't know where he'd get the money. He went to the store with the little bit of money he had. He bought an axe and then went to a local tradesman, a wood crafting kind of guy, studied under this guy, learned a skill, became an expert at, building log houses, went and saved up money from working with this guy to, buy his land, wound up building his own log house with his hands. And, he did it. And it's like he used his mind. The creator gave us this great creativity to, find solutions and create ways, right? Like God is not limited and we're not limited. We're God's children. And it's like there's a way for everything, So the land will come, the people you need to meet will come, you can find a way, right? Don't let any of those things hold you back. Just set a determination to go in that direction and follow what comes up.
Yes, exactly. And just someone had mentioned in the chat, technology doesn't mean technocracy. They're two different things.
Yeah.
Technologies can be made in the distortion, inside the distortion that supports that. But technologies can be made so that they enhance life and support nature and life and its ways. So there's a disharmonious technology and a harmonious technology. And as I've been studying Tartaria and all of the history, because the history has been rewritten, so I'm
Yeah.
questioning everything. Everything gets thrown out, and then only truth gets back in, sort of thing. In studying that old world Antiquitech, uh, it was elegant. It was using water for memory. It was using the ether to gather free energy. Uh, we have it already. So that is a technology, but it's a beautiful technology. It's a harmonious technology, right?
Hmm.
We'll get to that place once whatever this duality plays out, however it's going to play out. Once that happens, then that'll be the time to go forward with those technologies. So life will
Right.
be again, blissful and harmonious, and having that living that joy that we're meant to live and express on behalf of the divine.
Right. And Anastasia was telling Vladimir, like when designing the Kins domain, that he's like, oh, let me guess, we should live without electricity or without any modern appliance. And she's like, no, on the contrary. She's like, you shouldn't make a sudden shift that would be uncomfortable and unlivable. Like, give yourself all the things you need to live your life. And she just says, design life in a way that you won't need to do with those things in the future. You know what I mean? Because eventually, like our descendants, the kind of technology and things we use now will not really be very useful to them. They'll find more natural ways of living, and they will, develop in consciousness further than we have. And so, all of that is good. Like she says, you can use technology to hasten the implementation of your Kins domain. Like get an electric plow thing and plow, the perimeter of your hectare and plant your trees. No sense in like doing it all by hand. Like that's a lot of work. It's like 400 trees or something. So yeah, and to your point, you bring up Tartaria and things, and this is an interesting thing for anyone who's interested in the subject. Anastasia talks about the true history of the world. She talks about civilization. She says that she's a member of called the Vedrus civilization. She says it was a civilization of people that stretched from England all the way to China, everything in between. You know what I mean? It was one unified people, and there's so many things in history that confirm this, that we were one
Yeah.
people at one point, right? Even the Tower of Babel story, we all spoke one language and it was all splintered and so many things. But she talks about the civilization, and what she says is that it was a society of people. She calls them God people. She says the Vedrus people were God people because they knew God and they lived in harmony with God, and they all lived on their own Kins domains. The society at that time was, the world was covered in Kins domains. So as you were saying earlier, Amanda, like we're bringing back a way of life in a new way with all the things we've learned, you know, all the mistakes we've made and all the knowledge we've gained, to go forward on a new path. Because if there was no mistakes made or anything, we would have never gotten to where we are.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Right. So now we're stepping forward with new knowledge and new awareness. And Anastasia says that um, well, that like all the prophecies of ancient times, that this isn't the first human civilization, right? She says that there's been many before, and that we were supposed to have a disaster that would have probably wiped us all out in
Mm.
like 1992, but it didn't happen, and she attributes this to Russian gardeners and things like that. But what am I saying is that she says we've exited what she calls the dark forces window of time, right? This window of
Mhm.
time that the dark forces of the universe have to manifest their chaos and kind of wipe out humanity and kind of secure that victory. She says we're out of that, and we're not ever going back into it. She says right at the brink of disaster, a new conscious awareness has kind of dawned in people, and we can bring these destructive and creative forces within us into balance and move forward. So that way these things never happen again. So that's the trajectory we're on. So when people like, I see a lot of people in the community that are afraid of things that are happening in the world, or people ask me, like, what do you think is going to happen? I say, it's going to be great. Like, I see the future. I see the people creating the kins domains. I see the happy faces. I see groups of people going together and buying land. Like, it's all happening right now, and we can just get together and accelerate this.
Absolutely. And where our heart is and where our minds are, where our emotions go, this is what we want to listen to and pay attention to and be mindful of and be directive with it. Use that power. Don't just
Mm,
give it away, which I think all of the distractions and, you know, fear and news and all of this, all the feeds are feeding off of us and
truly.
taking us away from our creative force and our ability to hear when it's time to go and where, and to feel at peace within ourselves and settle the
Right.
waters inside of us so that we can really feel the calling and the cue inside of us and know when to act and but more importantly feel good and
Joy.
and joy and not be in this despair that is really the only disease I see anywhere at this
Mm,
point, you know.
mm,
um, so I'm it is very exciting, and it's a reminder, at least to me. Maybe it's time to reread the series, so I think I'll investigate it. Plus my fiance hasn't read the series, so he'll want to do that for sure. My father read it as well with me back in the day, so
oh,
might
that's
inspire.
amazing.
Yes, he's a very aware man, and so he may want to read it again as well, just to refresh. And we need that reminder.
We do.
We are man. We forget. we
Right.
we lose our way because it's part of our journey, and we're
Right.
meant to be relit and remember again and say, oh, it's all right. It's okay that you went there, and now remember. Oh yeah, okay. I mean, this is why I used to go to festivals every year. It would refresh me. It would
Mm,
remind me of dancing around a fire and swimming around others and children playing, and just this is who we are. This is life and what's good again, rather than being trapped in this, what they call the matrix, or this rat race. you know
hmm.
so
Right.
yeah. So anything before we wrap up, this has been very wonderful to help people see this, and also it's very inspiring what you're doing, and that you're right on it. You're right on the beat of it, and I'm really full of gratitude for not only this discussion, but just the importance of what you're doing in the community building aspect, which
Thank
people
you.
really need now more than ever. So
Yeah.
anything you want to leave the viewers with before we wrap up?
Yeah. There's so much I wish I could say more because you just said so much good stuff.
Well,
But
you can say it. You can
oh
say
yeah.
it.
I was gonna say one point that you made me think of in your last, section here was Anastasia says all the news that we see on the TV, she says it's the death throes of a dying system. It's the death throes of a dying system. This system is on its way out. It's dying. It's done. It's a done deal. You know what I mean? And the news, how new is the news? You know what I mean? We know the trajectory that they are going. The trajectory is always the same. The events are always different. You know what I mean? We know this. And so it's like, it's good to be informed and stuff, but it's not the end of the world. If another bad thing happens tomorrow, we saw it coming. You know what I mean? But the important thing is that there's people out there on the outside. We're building the new civilization, right? Like, this reality is being manifested every single day. The more of us that get inspired in our hearts and decide to create something like this, like, the faster it comes. You know, there's a part in the books that says, you can control the world from your garden. You don't have to, like, react to all the stuff that's happening. And so, man, there's so much I wish I could say. I just want to say thank you, everybody, for listening so far. One last idea I'd love to leave you with is, Anastasia, she talks about the eternal preservation of love in families, because what this is really about, this is about family. This is about man living in harmony with God, man living in harmony with all of nature and creation and being sustained and fed by the nature around him, but then also living a happy life that just continues to get happier. This is about family happiness, what all we're talking about here. The kin's domain, right? Like two, a husband and wife, they feel the love in their hearts, they create this space, and they join together with all these other people who are doing the same thing, this inspired creation that they're doing. And it's like we all want happiness, and how do we find it? And I would love to read just one little quote if I'm able to pull it up. uh,
Hmm.
just 1 second here. I would love to leave you guys with this. This is a quote from, and I kept looking over this whole time because I've got my screen is here on the side. But there's a quote right here. Um, Vladimir Megre in the books, he says, "Let each one of us take a small plot of his land, pull his whole mind and whole spirituality together, and create a very small but concrete paradise. He will transform his little piece of land on our large planet into a flourishing garden, giving material embodiment to his spirituality, following God's example. If millions of people do this in a whole lot of countries, then the whole earth will become a flourishing garden. A father and a mother who are actually creating a space of love for their children are more spiritual than the most celebrated wise men who only talk about spirituality. Let the spirit of each man spring up from the ground as a beautiful flower, a tree with fragrant fruit, and let this take place on every single hectare of our planet." And that's how I would end this call
Wow.
here.
Wow, that is, powerful. And it just shows you that it's very simple. It's all simple. We've made it very complicated. We've made it very difficult. And now we can step back and begin anew with this. And I wish to thank you from my heart,
Thank
Gabriel,
you.
so much for what you've given us today and for what you're doing. And let's catch up again. Let's stay in touch. And
Please, it's
then
such a pleasure.
and we can, if there's new inspiration or there's something that you want to ever announce, of course we can let people know where things are at, and keep inspiring them and reminding them who they are, so they
Thank
can
you.
continue to make their spaces of love too.
Thank you, Amanda. It's been such a pleasure and a joy and an honor. Thank you for having me. Thank you, everyone who's listened so far. God bless us all in creating this new, beautiful paradise earth with happy families and people living in love. And so, yeah, thank you again. I can't wait to connect more. Amanda, this has been, I feel like we're just scratching the surface, and I feel like there's so much more to talk about. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I thank you again, and I thank everyone, for being with us today. I've been blocked off of my main YouTube channel, so I had to
oh, no
use
way.
well, I'm always banned or
Yeah,
blocked or something.
right.
Um, but I've got at least one YouTube going, and I went on Twitter and I went on LinkedIn, which I never hardly use, but at least there's something broadcasting. But it will be up
Awesome.
on yummy.doctor, so it will be there. And I will have all of Gabriel's links to his website and some of his YouTube channel and Telegram channel. I have my Telegram channel, Healthy Dose of Truth, and yours is just called Anastasia Foundation. Is that it? Or
Anastasia.foundation is the website.
Mhm.
And then if you look up Anastasia Foundation on YouTube, you want to do Anastasia Foundation Ringing Cedars, or else you're going to get a bunch of makeup tutorials. Um,
Foundation.
yeah, it's pretty. Yeah, exactly. we got to beat them in the algorithm. We're
Okay.
not there yet. But
That's
if you
funny.
tell your friends to Google Ringing Cedars, we're on the first page of everything. And
Beautiful.
yeah, there's a page on the website called Getting Started. There's a button that says Start Here. It'll show you all the best ways to join the community. If you're inspired by this, you can meet other readers near you. We have a whole network of people everywhere. So you can come in and find people near you, and yeah, go out and get the books. I'm going to do my best to reprint them so they're easy to get and they're cheap. They're a little expensive now, but they're worth the money. Don't hesitate.
Yes.
If you need them on PDF, come in our Telegram chat and we'll get that sorted out for you.
And I have to say that if you lend them out, you probably won't get them back, because I learned that the hard way.
You probably won't. They're the most stolen books, according to the bookstores that were selling them. They were the most stolen books in the bookstore, and that's a good thing. You know what I mean? But people wanted them, so
They want it. They know they need whatever's inside, and they'll do whatever it takes.
they just need to get it, you know?
Oh, hilarious. All
Yeah.
right. Well, again, thank you so much. And thank you,
pleasure.
everyone, for joining us. And we will definitely do this again and have lots of other words between us, lovely words in the future. Okay.
Thank you. Amanda was
Bye,
so
everyone.
good. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Okay. Bye. Peace, everyone.